All right, welcome back to another epic studio tour. Today we're hanging out with Maor Appelbaum. Maor Appelbaum is a mastering engineer, and you've probably seen him because he's actually made his way around, I think, on every audio production YouTube channel there is. It's kind of amazing. He's again a mastering engineer who very successful, has mastered like hundreds of albums. I was just going through his discography. It's crazy. I'll put a link to his website down in the description if you want to check it out, because I'm not even going to try to like list them off. There's a ton. I learned a lot from this tour. I don't know. Mastering is like a mystery to me. Every mastering engineer I've met has basically done things in a different way, but this was the most informative experience I've had with a mastering engineer, and it was really fun. I hope you guys liked the video. Thank you, Maor, for having me, and it was really fun. Thank you to Sweetwater for sponsoring this video. Sweetwater has just been a huge supporter of this channel. Obviously, the best website to pick up gear if you are looking to add something to the studio. I actually have most of my gear listed down in the description under different categories, so if you're just looking at microphones or external mic external mic pre, stuff like that. They're affiliate links. It's just an easy way to support the channel if you're already picking up some new gear. Click on those links. It's so obnoxious. You just click those links and then it just lets Sweetwater know that you came there from this channel. It's a big help for me. I appreciate you guys watching. I appreciate you subscribing to the channel, liking these videos. If you didn't see, the last video I uploaded was on my Studio Kit drum sample pack. I just did a partnership with Drum Sample Shop, and I did a full breakdown of going through the pack, listening to the samples and the loops, throwing them in some songs, and did a full deep dive. We added presets and some new stuff like that. So if you want to pick it up, there's also a link to that drum sample pack in the description. And yeah, let's go check out Maor's mastering studio.
My name is Maor Appelbaum. I'm a mastering engineer. I work with artists such as Faith No More, Yes, Meatloaf, Starset, Sepultura, Il Nino, Armored Saint.
How long have you been in this room?
This room is about a year and a half,
Wow.
maybe plus, something like that. It's quite new, I would say. The room I had before, I had it almost a decade, and when we took it apart, I took some of the stuff from there, and because this is a bigger room, I had to combine more materials. So I utilized some of the stuff that I had then, which is the Prime Acoustic panels and the Prime Acoustic full traps and max traps. And I added those chocolate diffusers. I call them chocolate because they're like cubes. And then all the other panels, the ones that you see on the ceiling panels, and the big side panels, the ones there and the windows, and in the back here, those are from a company called Sense and Sound. You know, the combination here is, you know, positioning each one at its right place, then measuring, listening to the room. So it's a lot of work to get it to sit exactly in the spot that's needed. And it took us about a month to get this room the way we wanted, because we were really picky about every little thing. It's like, you know, you just hear it, you know.
I can imagine. I mean, I'm sort of like less critical probably, but still, it's still really important to me, like the treatment and the placement and, you know, how everything is sitting to my ears. But I would have to imagine for mastering that you put a lot of attention into every single part of how things are angled and how much. And what's nice is that you have windows, so you can still get some sunlight in here while you're working. If you're working during the day, I don't know.
Yeah, well, the old studio, I had it almost a decade and I didn't have sunlight for almost a decade.
Oh.
My vitamin D was down.
Yeah.
But yeah, the windows and the way we put the panels worked with the windows. The whole system here, besides the acoustical treatment, I also have a Trin-off system here, and also the electricity is isolated and everything is placed here in a way that there's no rattling happening. Even the carpet is actually sitting on top of like a rubber isolating pad, and
Yep.
a lot of the things here you'll notice they're on neoprene stuff, like
Material,
and made sure that it's really quiet,
Mm-hmm.
not too dead quiet, but something that has enough, let's say this isolation that you can listen to the music and just focus on the music, which was very important. That's what we're working on.
And then what else do you do outside of mastering? Because you do some other stuff too.
Well, mastering is my main thing. That's probably what takes most of my time. And then the other thing I do is I also consult and collaborate on developing hardware gear,
Mm-hmm.
and for recording, mixing, mastering, and also consult to different companies, audio companies. Collaborate also on plugins, and I do presets for plugins. But it all comes from the background of mastering,
Yeah.
and other backgrounds that I had in audio.
How did you get into mastering?
A funny thing is that a lot of times people assume that you went into mastering because that's the gig you aimed for. And in my case, what happened is I had a background as a DJ and a music journalist. And of course I worked in audio. I was a broadcasting engineer. I always found myself in the final part. Like a music journalist listens to the music after it's out. A DJ plays the music after it's out.
Mm-hmm.
A broadcasting engineer broadcasts either the audio or video to the audience. So it's kind of like the last process. I was a musician as well, so I had bands of mine, and I did some live sound, and I did some recording. I kind of had a bit of everything. Not that I can say that I was great at everything.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't say that. But I found that the mastering is something that was like a natural progression for me to go into, because it was the buffer between the listener and audience to the production.
Yeah.
And that's where I felt that my best assets were there. And so I tried other stuff, of course. I tried to not just jump into the mastering, but see what's else there. And in time, it just gravitated me towards it. And I'm happy that I did that, because I really feel at home doing mastering. And it's enough for me to keep it exciting for me, because I get to work on all types of music from all over the world. Different styles, different sounds, different territories. And it's all about presenting it and representing it better to the audience and making the listeners engage with it even more.
So you had named a couple different projects that you have worked on. Is there a particular style of music that you enjoy working on more, you find yourself working on more than other genres, or is it kind of, do you like to do a mix of things? How do you like to do it?
I get to work on all styles, and even stuff that goes to TV or syncs, placements, libraries, movies, even video games. So like OSTs, like original soundtracks of video games, or just themes in the games that were mastered, a certain song that was worked upon. I like a lot of styles. I've done anything from acoustic or classical cinematic to rock, metal, pop, hip hop, death metal, electronic music on all types, from different types of EDMs, from techno, trance, house to prog rock and jazz and blues and funk and reggae, bluegrass. I don't know, it's like so many types, and I like it. It's just, the fun of it is listening to the music and seeing how you can make the experience even better.
So mastering, to me, I've always described it as witchcraft, because there's an element of magic to it that I don't understand, and is looking at all your gear in here. I like to consider myself somewhat of a studio gearhead, and I recognize maybe 4 or 5 things. So you have so much stuff that I've never seen before, and I'm curious about. Can I ask you a little bit about your setup?
Sure, I actually have more, but then we have to pause and start pulling more stuff out.
So you've got this room that is perfectly tuned for how you like to work. And my next assumption is that everything is placed in a specific way that caters your workflow?
Well, the first thing is it's good to get information about the project. So a lot of times I'll talk to the producer or mixer, kind of get some background, because the background a lot of times can lead you to understand what's the expectations. For example, there's certain things that the producer, mixer, or artist doesn't like. It's good to know what they don't like.
Sure.
And good to know, of course, what they do like. That piece of information of what they like, what they don't like, can help you gauge things better. Plus, if there's certain issues that you have to take in consideration, for example, scheduling, like time-wise, the formats you need to deliver, what they're planning to do with it, if it's going for physical formats or just online, if it's going for vinyl, if it's going for cassette, CD. Those are very important information that you need to ask. After you had that discussion and know a bit more about the project, plus it's always good to connect with the people, because at the end of the day, we're working together. You know, it's a team effort, so you want to make sure you're part of the team. When the project lands here, I listen to it, because you really want to check it out. You know, you want to see if there's any issues or stuff like that. I play it on the system. I listen to it. If there's any issues, I might think either I can fix some of them or I have to leave them because fixing them will create more damage. Or if I can get in touch with the producer mixer and see if there's issues that they can fix prior to the mastering. That's a discussion by itself, because some of them can't, because they're out of the studio and finished the mixes and there's no recalling or coming back. And in that case, you have to work with it as is. In some cases, they can go fix if there's like too much, I don't know, high end on the cymbals or on the vocals, or too much low end on the bass or the kick. I mean, and they can go fix it, great. If they need a vocal up version, you know, it's possible to do that. So after listening, then comes the fun part, the mad scientist area. You know, I'll make my eyes look crazy now. And it's auditioning. And that's where you see this palette of colors and options come in. And that's where we that's where you enjoy pressing buttons. You know, you go to elevator, you press all the floors. You go up 1 floor, 2 floors. So that's where you go in and you press play. You choose the DA converter. You know, I can choose here each one of these, and then play it. And then you insert a piece of gear and you start auditioning different options. Okay, this does this. Oh, it actually is nice. This is too much. Okay, you change that. Then you check another thing. Does this work? And you start moving knobs and changing here, and moving this. You know, it's all about what I'm showing you actually is stuff that I do. I press switches. I move knobs. I listen. Does this sound right? Then okay, how are they combined? Do they work with each other, or they subtract each other? Okay, so all these inserts here are insert chains of different chains. Then I might say, oh, you know what? I think that I need to change to a different converter. So I go to a different A to D. You know, this is a great converter, but maybe I like a different sound. So I switch here and I change to this converter for the AD capture. And then, oh, okay, that AD capture is a bit smoother than this. Okay, but maybe I need to tighten up. Okay, so am I using this DA or this A to D? I know this is a lot at one time. This is the process of testing different digital to analog converters and different analog to digital converters. Which one is used best for this? Because each one has a sound. Stereo imaging, dynamics, the transient response, how it's feeling with it. You know, some of them are smooth, some of them are bright or tight. And each piece of gear here, it's like a world of its own. For me at least, I see gear as musical instruments. Just like you have a certain type of a piano, like an upright piano, and then you have a Steinway grand piano. They're different. You can still play the same notes, but you will respond differently to them, and they will make the song sound different because of the acoustic chamber, because of the way the strings sound, and they make the feel different. And that's part of what's important to get the feel in.
The first question I have is, this thing here in the center seems to be a big giant part of the workflow. You're I don't even, is it fair to call it a monitor controller?
Oh, this one.
Yeah.
So this is a mastering console.
Okay.
And it has different sections. This is the monitor section.
Okay.
You can choose which part of the console you're feeding to the monitor.
Yep.
And which input you're feeding. So you can check the first converter, the second converter. You can check what comes in. You can check the input prior to the inserts. You can check, so input, you can check the output.
Wow.
You can check then if you want to feedback from another device. And then you can do muting left, right, you can dim, you can check your stereo signal, mono signal, and your difference, which is the side signal.
Mm-hmm.
You can just listen to the right feeding both sides, left feeding both sides. It's your volume knob. You can change between the speakers,
Oh my gosh.
metering. So that's just the monitor section.
That is so cool.
This is the input section where you can choose which digital to analog converter you want to listen to.
Okay.
You have filters here, low cut and high cut, which you can just engage and then change the frequency.
Wow.
You have input knobs where these are input gains where you can attenuate up to 5 dB or add 5 dB by half dB increments. And if you need, you can even go further and add another 5 dB. That's if you have like a source that's really low.
Yeah.
This is the insert section. This is where you basically, like if you look at the DAW and you put plugins, one after the other, this is kind of like that. So you can put insert 1, which is a certain chain here. Insert 2 is a different chain, and you could cascade them. You can even flip between 1 and 2. So without flip, it goes 1, 2. With flip, it goes 2, 1.
Oh, that is so cool.
So you have 2 flips here. And then you can also insert an offset for the MS option. If you put MS, you can offset the dB plus or minus if there's a deviation between the side and the center. You have this for parallel if you want. You can add it or you can balance it like a blend. Here you have an output and a cut for the output. Output gains plus or minus 5 dB and half dB increments. Here you have an elliptical filter which monos, puts the frequency of chosen and downwards and a bit upwards to the monoing it. Here you have the width where you can expand or subtract. So that's the...
That's a huge, significant piece.
Yes, because it adds up everything. Yeah.
And that's Maselec? That's the company that makes it?
Yeah.
What's the model of this unit?
MTC1X.
MTC1X. Wow, that's the first I've ever seen of a mastering console. That's so cool.
It's a great mastering console, very useful, and has enough functions.
Okay, and what's this guy underneath it?
This one is one of my collaborations with Foot Control Systems, FCS. And this is a custom piece called the Workshop LTD-MA. And it's a combination of a few pieces, a few designs in one. It's a saturator clipper, 4 characters, and you have the drive, and you can smooth it, a high end. This is your output of it, how much you're recovering from the clipping. This is your mix knob. The drive is how much it's being pushed. The conditioning tailors the low end to it. Then you can engage it and disengage it. And the next thing is the gear drive. This is like, you can saturate with it, but you can, if you want, you can get to saturation, but you're basically driving the system, and it has a sound of its own that kind of pushes the presence of the sound, and you can engage or disengage and choose how much you're pushing. Wow. And that's also pushing the stereo insert section, which is a small console of 2 inserts, which you can add them each one, or you can, if you add both, you can swap, so 2 becomes 1, and this can drive this. So if you want to push the compression more, you can do this, and it will push into the compression. Then you have the Timber Farm, which is a combination of different transformers that you can choose from.
Oh, cool.
And each one has a different sound, but they also have alterations in them. If you put it in N and 0, it's no, so no alteration.
Okay.
And then you have alteration on the reactivity of them. It's how they react. And each one of these it's not just a transformer on its own, it's the transformer in the system, so it doesn't affect the signal coming in or out in terms of how it's loading it. Then you have an output trim that you can lower the output, and you can engage or disengage this function because it also has a sound. Even if you put it at 0 and engage, disengage, it will sound different. And sometimes you want to addition the lowering of it, and you'll put engage, disengage. Then turbo boost it's a kind of a secret sauce here that works with this, and it kind of pushes things up front, makes them very up front.
Wow.
And then the main process, engage, disengage, is this whole box.
Okay.
So it's a combination of a few different, saturated clipper with a lot of control, a gear drive that pushes the sound and the level, stereo inserts, which right now are connected to a few units that I'll show you later, and then the transformers, and then the alterations on them, and then the output trim, which has a sound, and then the turbo boost and the main process. And then for right now, for these inserts, we have this box, which is called the Torch, another collaboration I did with FCS, Foot Control Systems. And this basically gives you input trims, conditioning the low end, smoothing the high end, output trims, and then here you can choose what type of amplification you're using and how much you're driving it. So G is no amplification, so you can just use the filters, the low end and the high end filters and the trims. And then if you're going A, B, C, D, E, F, all these are different types of line amplifications, and how much you can drive them up to 5.5 dB. And that's kind of a coloration box that you can choose options, and you can bypass and unbypass them separately. This can go MS too if you apply the MS here. The Mangal LTD, that's basically a device that I had a different version of it in the past, which I'll show you. And then I collaborated with this with my partner, Chris Henderson from Handy Amps. So we took the original design and added 2 more circuits to it that affect the high end, and they can dampen the high end and do kind of a smoothing till full damping. And also a kind of a scoop, a movable scoop that moves in different areas from the low, mid to the highs, and then an output. This is the original device, the Pele. So it was just a plug and play unit.
Yeah.
And so here we added the other features and switches. So that's the Torch. Then I have, so insert 1 is these units that I mentioned, plus a few extra that I'll show you here. This unit is another collaboration with Roger Foot from Foot Control Systems. This is called the Bench, and it has these amp drive circuits that I can choose between 2 types. One is very tight and fast, and one is smoother on the high end and rounder on the low end. So it's more of a vintage. So one is more modern, quick. 2 is more vintage.
Yeah.
And you can turn it on or off, and how much you want to drive it, and how much you want to attend the drive afterwards. And then you have a pad, and then TBM is kind of a version of a turbo boost thing, but in a different sound. Then you have a trim for the output, because you can drive this unit. And then you have smoothing that you can apply if you put the turbo. It only applies on the turbo. And then you also have clipping diodes here, so you can push it really hard if you want and apply it. So you have smoothing knob, output trim, pad attenuation, amp drive, and then the turbo mode. That's a very subtle thing, but it can affect differently depending on how much things are pushed.
Sure.
And it's affecting that turbo knob.
And what's the name of this called?
This is the Bench.
That's right,
the bench, the Torch, the Workshop, LTDMA. Those are these units. And then I have the other custom units, the Oven, which this is a prototype. That's why the lettering looks different. And some of the knobs are actually not having the right name.
Sure.
The name here is supposed to be Flow, because that's what it does, like flow here. But back then, this is an old faceplate that was not actually finished like the other ones. So this is the Oven, which some of you might know of the plugin called the Oven from Brainworks and Plugin Alliance, which is a a modeling emulation of this.
Yeah.
There was another studio that you went to do a video that actually had this unit,
Oh yeah.
the Hideout.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Kane Churko has
Yeah,
this.
Kevin Churko, that's right.
Kevin and Kane, yeah, they have this. So this is the oven. It's a very thick and round sound. It could do coloration, tone shaping, and saturation.
Wow.
You have a 3-band Baxendale musical EQ. Like, I call it musical because it's every little move really feels that it's really working with the music. It's not just boosting the frequencies. They're tailored really well. And you can choose between different options for each one. You have a 2-position switch. Then you have the tube coloration in the cook, and there's 2 different voicings and 2 different intensities. And then you have the solid state section that also changes the sound of the unit from various coloration options to saturation. Choose high coloration or low, but it's to a certain point it's coloration, then above that point it's saturation.
Oh, cool.
And with the coloration, it's also intensity.
Yeah.
So every little move changes how the intensity becomes.
Very cool.
And you have air, like we call this warm air. And then this changes the top to presence, and you basically have 4 types of sound on the top burner. Then you have the stove, which is the sibling of the oven. It's a different tube topology, and it's a different sound. This is more tighter and cleaner compared to the oven, which is more thicker and rounder.
Sure.
This also has other features and other types of intensities and sonic options for the tube, and it also can become a tube driver when you change it to induction, and then it eliminates all these switches and knobs and keeps only these 2 knobs and these 2 switches, and it becomes a tube driver that you can saturate with it and push things really nicely.
Wow.
And then, so these are the 2 siblings, the oven, stove. We have the grill, which is even more aggressive, could be either more subtle but even more distorted.
Wow.
And it's a solid state unit. Then we have the cooker, which the cooker is part of the oven family, but it's a different thing because it doesn't have that tone shaping options like these, and it's a solid state unit that you have a very big sounding gain structure that's round, and you can push the steam to get more drive into it. The roast gives you this thickness that has a big range, so when you move the knob, it's not just immediately thickness, it's slowly going to thicker and thicker and thicker, and you can find the place where you want it to be, and it's not going to be jumping from one setting to another. You can find a range to play with and figure out where is that place that you want. And it has 2 options, warm and hot. Warm is less intense, hot is more, and it adds thickness to the sides, and like guitars or synths, everything that's like can have more detail and definition coming out, it can lift them up. Then you have the crisper, which is the high end adding to it.
Okay.
You can choose yellow or brown, which is the different types of boosting of the high end. The brown is more energetic one that can be more abrasive or penetrating. The yellow is the more smooth and just more airiness. Fry and sear also exist in the Mangal. That's because this was kind of the part of the prototype of what brought this. Fry again, it's a saturation dampening function that as the more you push it, the more it's going to smooth the high end to the point where it just dampens the high end. That's good for harsh material or stuff that you want to smooth a bit. The sear will do kind of a scooping that will move to different places, and you can find where you want it, and you can audition with on, off, and see what you think, if this works or not. You can take it out of the circuit. Pressure will be the output, and you can boost with it or subtract or attenuate, so you can just boost your steam and subtract the pressure. Preheat adds to the circuit another set of also a gain and transformers, so you get more level with the transformers as well, and they actually make it very tight. They're really unique transformers. So that's the cooker.
First thing I want to tell you about these units is I love the naming of the switches, that you're not putting in actual frequencies and stuff like that, because me personally, even with meters and stuff, I'll get in my head and go, oh, that's too much. Like if you put, you know, a specific amount or something like that, I will, like, the psychology of it will mess with me. But the fact that you're putting colors means I'm just using my ears.
Well, we did this on purpose because, one, we want this to be a creative process, and we wanted you to think like you're cooking something. Oh, let's add some spices, let's add some salt, oregano, basil, pepper. And when you think of it that way, you're probably more creative or more imagining, like, oh, I need some more sizzle. Okay, here's the sizzle knob.
Yeah.
I need it to be more cooking. Okay, cooking. You know, it's like, a lot of it has to do with that. And the second thing is, if we start putting numbers, they don't match up to what you're hearing, because even though they're starting from that frequency, it's not just that frequency, there's other. If you look at the graph, it just looks different.
Yeah.
So we prefer not putting the number where it's supposed to be, and then you're like, but it sounds more than this. Yeah, well, now you have to explain something.
Yeah.
So we prefer it being a creative process and making you want to play with it and feeling like you're cooking a nice dish in the kitchen. That's the feel. And also, you know, some of these processes are not just the numbers. They encompass much more things in them. So just giving them a numbers would be downplaying the possibilities. So the other stuff I have here, well, this is a compressor that, there is a plugin of a different version of this. This is called the Magic Death Eye compressor. This is an old version and a modified version that was done specifically for me. This version, a few features inside, and also the power supply was changed to an external one. And it's a tube stereo compressor. This one has 16 tubes, 8 per channel. This is a big input knob.
Yeah, that's
and
awesome.
This one has a wet dry and a dry level. And you can choose if you want just a compressor or you want to connect the wet dry circuit, which has a different sound by its own.
Yeah.
As you look, it's kind of a very similar to like a Fairchild, because it's that type of topology. And there's inside mods that were done because there's certain sounds that I like, so the tubes and
sure,
you know, some other stuff that, you know, just made it the way it is. And I do recommend that. And the plugin sounds really good. The plugin actually has a bass and treble. That's the Magic Death Eye compressor. I have another piece from Magic Death Eye, which is a one-off piece that was built for me, as you can see. It's a coloration box. So it's coloration, and even just passing through it has a kind of a thickness to it. Then I have this Terry EQ. This is an awesome EQ. It's well, normally when you get it, there's no numbers. It's just marks, but I had to have numbers so I can recall it, because
yeah,
I have a ton of recall sheets. Basically, it's like a low cut, low shelf, and then a high cut and a high shelf, like a Pultec type, but solid state. And then, so it's a passive, and then you have an active high mid boost and active low mid cut, and it has transformer in, it has an active buffer. So if you're doing, it has a sound to it, but if you're working single-ended or balanced, and it has also different types of capacitors that you can switch between. And you can do the high shelf, you can turn it to a high peak, like a bell, and this is your bell. This is an EQ that can go really subtle, or you can go aggressive with it.
Cool.
And I really like it. It's one of those EQs that I love. And I have a bunch of EQs, not here, but in my other room. And this is one that I really like. Then there's the Creamliner. This is a device from Sonic Farm. Some of you have seen these in live rigs. It's a tube. It's basically a line preamp, and you can choose how much you want on the output. You can choose if it's a triode or a triode or a pentode. And there's low end and high end that you can add. And you can choose if you want transformer output or solid state. Now it's solid state, this is transformer.
Oh, cool.
There's another unit here which is a new unit. It's not out yet. It's coming out. Actually, by the time this video will be out, it will be out. It's called the Master Nout from Sonic Farm, and as you can see, my name is here.
Oh, cool.
And it's because this is a collaboration unit where they designed it for my uses based on the specs that I required and wanted, and basically it has a triode, which is this mode, or a pentode, and for each channel you can choose whatever you want. So you can do MS or stereo if you hook it up to a matrix for MS. You have an input attenuator. You have the fat to an air, which is low end and high end, and how much you want to add. Each one has 2 options. It has a solid state or transformer out, and it has 2 types of transformers you can choose. It has a gain, so you can do low, mid, and high gain for the tubes. And it's the same idea as the one I showed you before, that it's a line conditioner or line preamp.
Sure.
Triode or pentode options on each channel, and you can put each one in and out if you want to only process one side and not the other, and you have a main bypass as well. The other unit you see here is the Whitestone P331, a tube unit, and it's a very subtle sound. You can feel it. It's warm but not mushy. It will smooth things, but still in a nice way. And you can push harder into the tubes or less. It has a lift EQ, so you can do it on the whole signal or just the high end.
Oh, cool.
Or just the low end you're passing through the tubes, or duo its lows and highs. And then you have a transformer. It's either out, so not going through transformer, or going through one setting or the other. And if you need to compensate for gain level, you can also add the gain. There's another gain section there that you can add. Really nice device, very subtle, great build. This section is part of my monitoring. I have a Benchmark DAC1 for monitoring, and I have a Lynx Hilo. This is the interface that comes from the computer, from the DAW, into here. Then it goes into my desk, comes back, and then my monitoring can come also from this. Great interface, amazing bang for the buck, I'm telling you. It's like you're getting so much options in this. Then I have this R2D2 rack, different converters and clocks. This is the Lavery Quintessence. It's gold, love it. Tight, has good presence, good low end definition, very good presentation. Then there's the Lavery Savitra. They pair great, super definition, everything is so clear with it, amazing converter as well. I love those both. I sometimes pair both together, sometimes I pair the Quintessence with a different A to D, sometimes I pair the Lavery Savitra with a different DA. Then clocking, I have different clocks. I have the Antelope 10MX clock, I have an old Big Band Apogee clock. These are not made anymore. I have a Mutec MC3 Plus clock. This is a classic, the L2. Everybody knows this, the plug-in. This is the hardware. So L2 was a hardware.
Oh,
Okay?
wow.
So there was an L1 plug-in.
Okay, yep.
And then there was L2 hardware and L2 plug-in. Then this is an atomic squeeze box from Inner Tube. It's a very unique compressor, great detail. And you can smack it. Then this is a very known compressor, the API 2500. This is modded. It doesn't sound like the normal one. This is an old version of it. It sounds different than the original. I like the way that it reacts to the music. Can be very aggressive and very punchy. This is a Crane Song head that was modified by Dev Hill to have a Quantum DA. Then we talked about there's the Mutec MC3 Plus clock. Then there's another A to D here, a Rupert Neve Designs MBC. This is a converter that has like a different sound than most. Then I have, this is netted because the knobs can move.
Yeah.
The last thing you want is to work on something and something is not aligned.
Yeah.
This is the JCF, it's the same company, JCF Audio. And this is an amazing converter. It has a huge sound on the DA, and the AD has a very smooth taper sound, which I really like a lot. Been doing lots of records with this. This is a router, a digital router, where I can choose which A to D I'm using.
That's going to be so useful.
Then I have a System 6000 here. These are prototypes that, like I said, we develop stuff, so I test stuff.
Yeah.
And I have more on the other room, as I mentioned. So this is the roaster. Right now you see I put it in marks even though we already have one. So we go through phases of each prototype.
Sure.
This is a mono-channel producer's front end where you have a solid state high voltage preamp with a DI. Stove LTD. LTDs usually mean it's limited because it's the prototype.
Sure.
Oven, prototype 2. A roaster, this is the last prototype. This is the one I told you before, which was a plug and play.
Yep.
Then these guys, these are mono channels. They're about 15 tubes each one. On this one, you can cook 4 omelets. In the same idea, kind of like a Fairchild, but it's a different sound. And then with the DC threshold and AC threshold, you set it up. So the speaker setups, these are PMC IB1S passive speakers. Wow. They're driven by a Bryston 4B SST square, giving you exact models. I have these special boxes that PMC made for me, basically tune the tweeters differently. It just shapes the speaker. So I have a dedicated line, totally dedicated to this room, and it goes through a Furman SPR20i regulator, and that's the balancing and isolation unit that runs this whole studio. When I crank up the volume knob, which I can do now, tell me what you hear if you hear.
Oh my God. Yeah, that's scary. It's actually scary.
It's important for me that it will be that clean because every piece of gear has a noise to it, noise floor. Different pieces of gear have other like noises that accumulate with other gear.
Yeah.
And because a lot of the developments that we do for the gear, it has to go through here too.
Yeah.
Then I need to hear the noise.
Yeah.
And in order to hear the noise of the gear, you gotta have a very quiet system.
Yeah.
So you can focus on that noise. Everything is housed in this desk. Cables, as you see, they're loose and in the back. Everything is spread in a way that doesn't clog. You know what I mean? Like, because the last thing you want is your foot.
Oh yeah.
You know, hitting a cable while you're working. So everything is in the back there, and
that's amazing. This was really cool. You showed us. We went through the room, the acoustics, the system, the mastering console, all this special gear that you've built a relationship with, help partner in design, and some other stuff. All the D to A, the workflow, speakers, power. Mastering to me, as I said, is very mysterious. So this is really enlightening to see how you work and how you think about it and some of the subtleties and qualities and just like the approach, which is super cool to see. So do you have like a place that people who are interested in following you can go and follow?
My website is www.maorAppelbaum.com, maorappelbaum.com. I'm new to Instagram in terms of I don't really know yet much of it, but I have an Instagram under Maor Appelbaum Mastering.
Okay.
And I'm approachable. People, call me, so email me. So I don't have a YouTube channel yet, but maybe in the future.
Maybe in the future. I've strongly encouraged it. I will watch all the videos because this is all fascinating to me.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for inviting me here and coming to see how you do all this. It was a lot of fun. I'll put links to all of your stuff down in the description for people to follow you. And appreciate it so much.